In our next local story, we learn about two authors, Marietta Holley and Hope Marston.
Here's the story. Do you know about Marietta Holley? She was a trailblazer, a 19th century advocate for women's rights, sold over 10 million books, and she's from right here in northern New York. I sat down with Jordan Walker of the Jefferson County Historical Society to hear more about the author. Marietta Holley was a famous 19th century satirist right here in northern New York.
Yes, she was.
Can you give me a little bio on Marietta?
Sure. Well, she was born in 1836 and right in Pierpont Manor, Adams, New York. She came from humble means. She was in a large family. She was a very shy young woman, very sickly child, and so she spent a lot of time reading, and as she got older, she found her voice through writing. And she actually found herself writing through a pseudonym called Josiah Allen's Wife. And she was actually quite funny. You wouldn't know what to talk to her because she had a hard time expressing herself, but she had a really great sense of humor and dealt with that to voice her opinion on women's suffrage, as well as a number of other human rights issues, children's rights, colored rights is what they called it then. She wrote a book on a number of different issues. So she was just a very fascinating character, and a woman for her time during that time period is just pretty fascinating.
And how many copies did she sell? She sold a lot, right?
Millions of copies, really. She wrote over 25 books, right. And then a number of smaller ones as well. So she was an international author, and she was published by the same publisher as Mark Twain. So she was very well known at the time. It didn't stand the time quite as long to be known and as well recognized as long as Mark Twain and as largely, but at the time she would have been quite well recognized.
What was it like to be a woman writer back then?
Back then, I mean, it's a testament that she wrote under another name. Women had to kind of take an extra step to be recognized. It was something that they either had to have a lot of money or a lot of backing. They wrote under pseudonyms quite often, and you needed to be very creative, and oftentimes it had to be a gentle sort of approach. It was more poetry or something, a botanical science, you know, like flowers, and it just took a little time to kind of break through into topics that were more of the men's category, like politics or voting. So this is especially impressive that she was writing about this.
So she really pushed the boundaries. What was her impact on women's rights?
Her impact on women's rights for this area was very profound. She was a contemporary of well-known suffragettes like Clara Barton, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony. She actually corresponded with them quite often. They inspired her, and they also encouraged her. We actually have letters here at the Historical Society from Susan B. Anthony to Marietta Holley, you know, encouraging her to not be afraid, use your voice. And it's really cool to see that she was very much a part of that process. Yeah.
And how do you think that she broke glass ceilings for women writers nowadays?
Sure. Just the fact that she not only wrote about women, but she wrote about different rights. She wrote about race. She wrote about children's rights, things that you wouldn't really think about women even considering, or anyone considering talking about at that time, especially up here in the North Country. We were just so secluded and seemingly away from all those big city, you know, different political conversations. We were a part of that conversation up here, and she inspired a lot of women to stand up.
Marietta Holley certainly broke glass ceilings in her field and paved the way for modern women writers, but that wasn't without challenges. I sat down with Hope Irvin Marston, a local author living in Black River, and asked her if she's faced any challenges being a woman in this career field.
No, I never felt like, well, you're a woman, you can't do this.
Right.
Because if you tell me I can't do something, I will show you I can.
So do you have any advice for young writers that want to write and that's their dream?
Oh, yes, I do. If you want to, people say I want to write, what they mean I want to write for publication. You have to read and write. Mm-hmm. Every day you read and write, and I don't mean grocery lists, you read things. I've read many books of writing prompts where I write about things I would never written about, and even keeping a journal. just what you did today, not your grocery list, but because you're making sentences and you're thinking, pretty soon you're writing more carefully. And so read and write. Read the books you want, the kind of books you want to write, and read how to write that kind of book.
Much like Marietta Holley, Hope is no stranger to writing about strong female characters. In her latest publication, she writes about Mary Jane Bowser, a kitchen servant in the Confederate White House who has an opportunity to gather Southern war plans that could help bring about the defeat of Confederate troops.
They have a system where she writes down messages, tiny, puts them in a special shoe, and goes out, sneaks out at night. Now, she can't be out after curfew. She currently can't sneak out, be gone now. But she has papers with her if she would get caught. But if they caught her, they would hang her, and they would have hanged Elizabeth Van Lew too. So every time she went out, she had to do this. After the war ended, President Grant, General Grant, said that he got more fresh news as soon as it was going to happen from Elizabeth Van Lew than from anybody else. It's a story of Elizabeth Van Lew and Mary Jane, her former slave, who risked everything. When Mary Jane went to the White House after she agreed to do this, because she wanted to do it as a favor to Elizabeth because she had done so much for her, there's no proof that she ever saw her husband again. There's no indication. She survived because, I don't want to ruin this story, but she survived, and later she did things to help save. And Elizabeth spent her fortune, her inheritance, rescuing slaves. She would go buy the slaves that were for sale if she knew that they were relatives had gone sent north. So they gave the two women, it gave all. You know, I mean, that's what I'm really wanting to say, that this lady was outstanding, and the South did not lose the war because of Elizabeth Van Lew and Mary Jane Bowser, because when the troops got up there, they were waiting, and finally at the end, Jefferson Davis says, somebody's finding out, somebody's delivering the spying. Wow. I won't tell you what happened. You have to read the book.
From the 19th century to now, local Northern New York women like Marietta and Hope have been writing important books, influencing change in our communities through the power of their writing and inspiring future generations of women writers to do the same.
Stay tuned for more Celebrating Women.